Welcome back to our next episode of Mini Mics and Mini Chairs. I'm Kelly Beck. I'm the BCBA and Director of Beck Behavior Therapy and Consultation. So today we're going to have a kind of intro video into sensory systems and talking about kind of being over and understimulated. We're going to be talking about that in coming episodes. We're really going to break it down into the different sensory systems and try to give families some suggestions for how to help with those sensory needs. So today I wanted to give that introduction so that you feel like you understand what we're talking about when we say a sensory diet or a sensory plan, sensory profile, any of those sort of interchangeable terms. So I always give my parents what I call my coffee cup talk. It always felt like a good way to make it make sense. So I've got my Starbucks coffee cup here. As any good BCBA, there's the running joke that we all drink a little too much caffeine. So I've got my Starbucks here, and it's a good kind of visual representation of how we want to approach making sure that someone's not over or understimulated. So you think of them like a coffee cup, and we want the right amount of coffee in it in order to be successful. So when you start thinking about things that a kiddo on the spectrum, or really anybody, I think this would kind of apply to anybody. When you start thinking about everything that you deal with in a day, that's pouring into your coffee cup. So down to sounds you hear, whether things are going the way you want them to or not. If you just woke up not feeling it today, your coffee cup on that day might be a little smaller. Maybe you're not working with a large coffee cup. You're working with something a little smaller. And so we think of everything we deal with being what we call a demand. In ABA world, I know that sounds like a really aversive term, but a demand is really anything that you've been asked to do. Be it you had to get up for the day, or you had to put on a certain clothing item, or you're having to eat a certain thing, or say a certain thing, or not do a certain thing. It's all gets into demands and things you have to deal with, and then your experiences. So when you go to places, you're dealing with people, you're dealing with sounds, you're dealing with maybe unexpected events that are occurring. So that's constantly pouring into this coffee cup. And so eventually, if you don't have anything to empty it, what happens? You overflow, you get burned. And so you might think of that getting burned like a behavior happening. We didn't make sure that we had enough room in the cup. So we have to do things to empty that cup a little bit so that we can deal with more things. So maybe that's going and having some quiet time, and, maybe a calm space and nobody's talking to you. Or when you do things like, I'm going to listen to my favorite podcast on the way home, because it just makes me feel like I kind of have that calm down time. That's you emptying your coffee cup and leaving room for more demands when you get home. And so our kiddos on the spectrum are the same when they do things like jump on a trampoline, or they maybe they want to sit in a dark space, or maybe they want to play with their toys and they don't want anybody to talk to them. Then that's a way that they're emptying that coffee cup so that they can deal with more things. To use a personal example, my kiddo would come home from school, and for the first hour she's home, she doesn't really want anybody to play with her. She just wants to get out almost every toy she owns and act out certain scenes of Daniel Tiger that are really important to her. And this was very regulating for her. And we wouldn't push lunch. We wouldn't push her to do anything else. We just gave her that time to regulate. We let her empty that coffee cup so that she's ready to tackle the rest of her day and ready to deal with more demands. Then she's ready for lunch. Until then, I'm not ready for that demand. So we're allowing that to occur. You want to have that in your day so that you're not overstimulated. Similarly, you can be understimulated. We see this a lot with times where maybe they have breaks from school, it's Christmas break or summer break, you're not doing as much, that routine's really thrown off. And so they're not getting as much in their day as they're used to having. So you don't have the right amount of caffeine. Your cup's a little too empty. We need to fill it back up. So we start doing things to add to their sensory needs. So maybe that's adding music to their environment. Maybe it's saying, okay, let's go jump on the trampoline. Let's go outside and run around the yard. We're adding that sensory back to their day so that, again, we're keeping them at that nice, happy level. We all like a good, nice, full coffee cup, appropriate amount. So we're not overflowing, we're not too less. We want the right amount. So maybe even try to think about your own self as a parent or caregiver, or just, like I said, a person in general. It applies to everybody. What do you do in a day after a long day to regulate yourself back down? Or when you're sitting on the couch on the weekend and you're thinking, man, I'm bored. I just don't feel great. What do you then go do to add to your day and make yourself feel better? So it's the same sort of concept for our kids on the spectrum. And that's what we as caregivers can try to remember when we're working with them on that daily basis. How is what I'm asking them to do adding or taking away from that sensory cup? And what do I need to do to support them? So I always recommend that our parents just take notes. Certainly, if you're in ABA, if you come to ABA with us, our parents will tell you we love data sheets. We love to help them track those sensory profiles and try to help them identify things that over or understimulate their kiddos and what helps cause those behaviors and how can we help. But just take notes, because what you'll find is if you go back and read them, you'll start to see those trends. As a behavior analyst, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for trends. And how do I start to see patterns? And then how do I start to kind of work with those things? So you can take notes. If you're take notes for about a week and see what happens. Make a note. I went to the grocery store and this is who went with me, and this is how my kiddo acted afterwards. What behaviors did they have? And then, maybe even look at it a couple of days later, because what we find sometimes is our kiddos will mask through an event and they will make themselves deal with something that they may not normally want to deal with. That's what masking is literally what it sounds like. We're putting on a mask. I'm going to try to appear as normal as possible. And I will tell you, our kids, youngest of children, highest of support needs, they're still good maskers. They're still going to mask. And so you think about, were they masking it during that situation? And then really 2 days later, did they start to have behaviors? And so you're looking for that trend, because you want to then see how can you change or do something different to affect that behavior later, and so that's definitely where somebody like a behavior analyst like myself can come in and try to help you figure those things out. But if you can even just start with identifying trends, then you're already off to a good start. And then you can start to apply some of the other things that we're going to talk about in the coming weeks to add to their environment or help, take away, so that they're better regulated and they can learn to deal with the various things that they have going on during the day, the things that they have to come into contact with, just going through their daily routines. So take notes is kind of my first suggestion. And then also remember that everything is not what it seems. Again, getting on that masking concept, kids that may be running around at a birthday party and they're playing and they're having the best time, or what it looks like having the best time. They're giggling, but they seem to always be running away from all the other kids. That is a cue to me of we might be a little overstimulated and we're really kind of signaling, I'm not okay with this. I don't understand what's happening. I'm not okay with what's around me, and I'm just going to avoid it, but I'm going to try to mask at the same time and look like I'm having the best time and be giggling. I will tell you, again, I use a lot of personal examples. My own personal child does this. And so when we're at a birthday party and she's, running around laughing, but then she still seems to be avoiding everyone, then I start to think, okay, is it really time for us to maybe be all done with the birthday party? And that's a way that I can, help be respectful of her and where she's at right now. She's still very young, and I don't have to necessarily push her to deal with being at a birthday party for an extended amount of time and doing all these different things. I'm going to find those ways that I can support her sensory wise. I'm not going to make her stand there while they sing happy birthday. She doesn't like it. I'm going to allow her to, kind of go off on her own for a minute. But knowing that as she gets older, she starts to have more abilities to deal with things, then we can start to maybe step through some of these scenarios where we want her to, maybe be okay with playing with the other kids for a few minutes. She even will develop her own coping skill of being okay with being around friends at a birthday party, and she would ask for a break. She would want to go off and sit in a room by herself for a minute and calm down, and then she would go back. So just know as a parent too that it's great to find balance for where your child's at right now, the skills they have right now, the abilities they have, what their sensory profile is right now, because it's going to change. It's going to change as they get older, and it's going to be something that you can start to work through in those areas that, maybe we want them to, not have to not be a part of those birthday parties because they're overstimulating. How can we step through that birthday party and find that balance? So know that that's part of that growth, and you don't have to suddenly do things at 2 and 3 years old because you want them to be able to do it when they're 7 and 8. They don't developmentally have all the skills necessary to be able to process that. So everything is going to kind of come with time, just as a typical child would develop. So remember that as parents, you don't have to tackle everything when they're 2, 3, 4 years old. So that's kind of an introduction into that sensory systems, overstimulated, understimulated. Like I said, in the coming weeks, be sure to check back. We're going to really break this down into several videos talking about each sensory system, try to describe it for you, and then try to give recommendations. If they're overstimulated, how can you help? If they're understimulated, how can you help that? So that we're, hopefully giving you the tools to be able to understand your child's sensory profile and then be able to know how to support them. And again, like a lot of things with ABA, it applies to anybody, not just kids on the spectrum, not just kids who are neurodivergent. It applies to everybody. So be sure to check back with us. And as always, thanks for watching.